He was an ordinary guy, but fate played a cruel joke. Now he is in the body of the most hated villain. Every step is a trap, every word is suspicion. To survive, he will have to change his fate and prove that even the most hated can become a hero. Will he be able to rewrite his history? Let's find out. This story begins with Princess Ryan's carriage being surrounded by wolf-shaped monsters on the way. Her night guards stood up to protect her. Julius gave them orders to protect the princess at all costs and not let the enemy pass any further. The monsters were much more numerous, and he noticed that the situation was getting worse and worse. And since this was the case, they needed to retreat temporarily. At that moment, the protagonist appeared and assessed the situation. Julius saw him and thought that this was the same guy, the notorious dishonest robber. The wolves were narrowing their circle around the carriage, and the knights spoke in confusion. If you think about it, they had nowhere else to retreat. The enemy's ring was shrinking tighter and tighter. The protagonist appeared, took his magic book, and ordered it to spread the fire. Julius and the guards, seeing his actions, thought that they had all come to an end. The protagonist extended his hand over his book and activated the endless circle with advanced fire magic. MC's magic worked and blew the monsters to smithereens. The rescued knights looked at MC in surprise. The protagonist asked why they were staring at him. One of the knights, who had crouched down next to his wounded friend and was trying to help him somehow, asked the protagonist if he was somehow connected to the rebels. The protagonist advised him to forget about it and handed the guy a bottle of some liquid. Nodding at the wounded man, he told the guard to give his secret potion to his friend, the healing effect of which was stronger than those useless high-class potions with which he tried to cure his friend. The knight hoped that this would be so and gave the potion to his comrade. Then something happened that surprised the wounded man's friends. His bitten-off arm was completely healed in seconds. It was the amazing power of the potion. The princess got out of the carriage, and the knight called out to her. She folded her hands in a grateful gesture and thanked the master magician, because thanks to him, they were able to avoid such a difficult situation. The protagonist told her to leave her gratitude. He was guided only by the fact that he did not want to waste time. The girl objected because he really saved them, and she should thank him. At that moment, Julius approached them and noted that she should not thank him under any circumstances. Ryan asked him what was the matter. He asked her to just listen to him. And turning to the main character, he asked, what the hell made him do this? Who did the arrogant magician think he was? The guards were surprised. This young man, that the arrogant magician saved them. The knight, whose hand the protagonist saved, pointed his sword at him and said that, despite the fact that he was their savior, they cannot endanger the princess. Julius took the girl's hand and told her that they were leaving right now. When the carriage was ready to leave, the protagonist called out to the little knight and told him to head west. They would encounter this pompous guild of knight heroes in one city. They would protect the princess. People like them were only smart enough to help. The knight was surprised. Why would he do that? The protagonist came closer to him, put his hand on his shoulder, told him to shut up, and just listen to him. He continued that if he ignored him, the princess would die. If he understood him, let him tell that grumpy old man Julius. The knight answered him that he understood everything and rushed to catch up with his friends. The protagonist looked after him, so they called him an arrogant magician. At this time, the princess asked Julius why everyone was wary of the young man who saved them. He didn't seem bad at all. The assistant replied that this man was a villain with a bad reputation. His name was the arrogant magician Lobelia Crowley. Despite his education at the highest magic academy, he used his enormous power for personal gain and hurt people. How many people lost their homes because of him? Many even lost their lives. He truly deserved the name of the devil, and Julius advised her never to get involved with this man. The princess wondered if the one being persecuted needed some reason to save her, so why didn't he do it? The assistant answered her that he could not comprehend the thoughts of insane people who studied dark magic. The girl fell silent and thought that she did not sense any evil intent from this man, as from her father, who was killed for tyranny. In addition, he said this without expecting a reward, so as not to waste time. What could this mean? Her head was boiling with thoughts. She tried to understand what was what. But despite all that, she thought it was so cool of him. At that moment, a small knight knocked on the carriage window and said that he had a small proposal. If they explained the situation, they could help them. In any case, it was better than running away without a plan. Julius clarified he was talking about the legendary order of knights. Then they really could help them out. The small knight asked, so they were coming? And after receiving a positive answer, he exhaled and thought that he couldn't tell them that this was the protagonist's advice. When he called them, he thought he would kill them. But if he didn't come, they would die. Even with swords pointed at him, he was worried about their safety. Maybe he wasn't as bad as the rumors made him out to be? Who was their hero, Seto Arima? He was once a 23-year-old part-time worker at a convenience store. After serving another customer, he decided to play a little game while time allowed. but he would never have thought that he would end up in one of the games. Besides, it just so happened that he was reborn as the most vile villain. Classic RPG, Arcadia Fantasy, is a popular game on the phone, which has always been at the top of user ratings. The story of a hero who received the blessing of brave fire, who saves the world together with his beloved. The official name of the hero is Reynard, a young man chosen as a hero in a ritual. Despite his inconspicuous appearance, he is adored by girls, which is part of the plot. He is the absolute protagonist, who has received absolute trust, and now he is the reincarnation of the most hated villain in history, Lobelia Crowley. He sits among the 12 strongest in the world and seeks forbidden magic, known as dark magic. From Lobelia's diary, one could conclude that he has completely mastered dark magic. Arima flipped through the diary and thought about why he became such a character. It was problematic that he had to speak in such a tone. And also, it was Lobelia who died at the end. If he was the reincarnation of this hero, then his death meant too? No, that was bad, and he had to avoid it at all costs. Besides, this guy was his favorite character, and he wanted to be rewarded with a good ending instead of a bad one. His character was the most tragic. In fact, he was loved more than all the other characters. The reason for this was his past, the great war between humans and demons, a war between the Demon King's army and human magic. In a village on the border of the conflict zone, this hero was born. He lived with his sick father and his younger sister Eru, and the three of them knew no hardships, despite being poor. One day he walked sadly along the road and thought about how he hadn't found a job again today. He didn't want to steal anymore, but they couldn't live without money either. What would he tell his dad? He had already made excuses that he was working at a stall, but this time he would have to say that he had helped someone in the field. Suddenly, he heard a groan and saw a man lying on the ground. Lobelia, who understood the cruelty of life and the suffering of people, could not leave a fallen demon to die. He helped him up and brought him to his home. The boy shared the little food he had hidden in the house. Eru approached the demon and sympathetically stroked his head. When the demon came to his senses a little, he said that he would never have thought that among people there would be those who would be so kind to him, a demon. He added that he would never forget this kindness and wished them luck and fortune. Then the boy thought that he was very happy to meet him. But he did not know that the army of demons that had come for their comrade had sold the children and women of the village into slavery to the merchants, the same people, and killed the men. So he found himself a prisoner. He was lying on the floor, chained to the bars, and he could hear screams. He had a headache. He thought that all this had happened because of him. Someone like him was not capable of good things. The days he spent in a cold cage, tormented by guilt, were like hell. But one day, he managed to escape. When the guards came to check on the prisoners, one of them saw a broken chain and exclaimed that one of the slaves had escaped. The second one began to scold him, called him an idiot, because they told him to change these old handcuffs. He ordered him to run after him. He could not run far. At this time, Lobelia ran as fast as he could until he met a man. He leaned over to him and asked if he was lost. Then he noticed that the iron on his leg belonged to a slave, didn't it? He said what a pity it was, stroked the boy's head and said that it must be fate that brought them together. The man asked him if he wanted to be his son. Lobelia was taken aback by his question, but he did not dare to refuse the offer. So the Crowley family, aristocrats who could not have children, adopted him. In order to become the next head of the family, he received an elite education. At the age of 12, he began attending a magic academy. His grades were outstanding, but day by day his cruelty grew. The broken heart that had seen hell could not be restored. One day, he took a book from the library and his classmates said that he was looking for this book. He asked to lend the book to him when Lobelia finished reading it. In response, he beat up his classmate very badly. Sometime later, his studies at the academy came to an end, and at the graduation ceremony, he exclaimed that he did it. He was the best in the class. He was able to get this far thanks to his efforts. His adoptive father turned to him and noted that there is something more important than rankings and grades. He meant a sense of morality. The father continued that his spoiled personality, hurting everyone around him without a second thought, had not changed a bit. And although the next phrase was difficult for him, he still managed to speak and said that Lobelia was no longer his son. Even the affectionate Crowley family could not allow repeated problems. After his father disowned him, the boy fell into despair. He remembered all the events, how he lost his biological father, how he was made a slave, how he fought with and without reason, and now his adoptive father abandoned him. He was overcome with anger and resentment, and in order to destroy the world that continued to betray him, he fell so low that he turned to dark magic. Sometime later, after another of Lobelia's pranks, a guy approached him. He asked him who he was anyway. The guy introduced himself as Reynard, and continued that, on behalf of the hero, he came to stop him, a cruel magician. Against the entire guild known as the Hero Knights, the villain fought alone for 4 days and nights, including using magic, but still lost. Reynard stood before the defeated villain and told him that he could not defeat the power of their friendship alone. He advised him to take his defeat as a chance to think about his choice. He could still improve. The mage was exhausted by the unprecedented humiliation. When his opponents walked away from him, he thought about the power of friendship and through clenched teeth, angrily muttered that he would never understand this pathetic trash. Moreover, he would send him to the abyss of hell and make this saint suffer from hopelessness. Over time, Lobelia became stronger and still fought Reynard, hoping to defeat him. However, he did not win even once. By the time his defeats became too absurd to count, he joined the Demon King's army, which destroyed his home. But here too, he was betrayed. The Demon King's minions cast a laxative spell on him. This led to a decisive duel with the hero who came to destroy the demon army. After a long and exhausting battle, Lobelia died in this fierce battle. Arima was deeply touched by this story with his character. He thought, if this is not a tragedy, then what else could it be called? After his death, Lobelia's past was revealed, and he won the hearts of even those who initially despised him. However, from the side of the hero Reynard, he was an absolute villain. The characters in the story refused to find the truth about how he became a villain. Lobelia's memories surfaced in the protagonist's mind once again. In a lonely life filled with betrayal, he died alone. As long as MC as a character, he could not turn away from the plot. Then there was only one path left for him. First, he went to a place to get some food. When he went inside, everyone present began to whisper among themselves. He placed an order, and the owner, after glancing at the order, asked him if he wanted to bring all of this with the order. The protagonist answered positively, and the man asked him not to rush. Arima sat down at the table and thought that the innkeeper was clearly afraid of him. But at least he was not thrown out the door. Since his reincarnation, wherever he went, there were always those who looked at him, those who trembled in fear. There were also those who had a strange glint in their eyes. He knew that the only way to avoid such treatment was to clear his character's bad reputation. If this was a game, then he was sure that somewhere in here there was an event where you could defeat the Demon King. If he remembered correctly, there should be an event where the player defeats the Dragon King Boros. If he defeats him, people might see him differently as his character. The plan to free the people from the rule of the Dragon King? Good things must be done quickly. So he decided to leave there by carriage tomorrow. At that moment, a guy came to his table and wanted to ask him a question. The protagonist nodded in agreement, and the guy asked him, he is Lobelia, the arrogant mage, right? He has a bad reputation, but he can share a good story if the mage works with him. The protagonist told him that he is not interested. The guy said that it is not cool and asked him to look at the next table. He asked if Lobelia sees the hero knight at that table. The protagonist looked where the guy was pointing and saw a girl named Claudia. She had a strong sense of justice for both the commoner and the knight. Isn't she the one who hates Lobelia the most? He felt uneasy. Could it be that he was being watched from the entrance of the city? At that moment, his interlocutor took a glass of liquid and splashed it in his face. Then he said that if he caught him here, I wonder how much he would get? This was a perfect opportunity that he had to take advantage of. At his sign, the protagonist was surrounded by his interlocutor's strong friends, and MC thought, are they going to hand him over to the knights? The guys started attacking him, and at that moment, he noticed that Claudia had paid attention to him. Taking a fighting stance and parrying the blows of the attackers, the protagonist thought that with such a body, blows do not bring pain. And yet, being on the receiving end of blows was annoying, and so he used wind magic shock. When all the attackers lay defeated on the floor, he was embarrassed. He just wanted to catch his breath from the blows, but in the end, he did bad things. He decided to leave before things got worse. Because the customers of the establishment started to talk among themselves like, who is he? He started a fight, used magic, and the guys immediately fell. He was about to leave, thinking that he would find another place where he could eat. If he used magic without rest, he would get sick. But at that moment, he heard Claudia calling out to him. The girl asked him, did he attack the adventurers, right? But he is not the kind of person she would just let go. She asked, what was he up to? The protagonist answered her, what made her think that he was up to something? He just wanted to eat, and when he was interrupted, he responded with a blow. Even if he told her that he was a victim, like her, she still would not believe him. The girl asked him, puzzled, what did he mean? He continued that approaching him with unspoken information and eternal beliefs once again shows the level of training of the knight heroes. The girl was silent, then answered him that she was too busy to waste her time talking to the enemy. She left, and the protagonist thought that it was too close. He was sure that she would draw her sword. He realized that he angered her. He had to do something about his sharp tongue. The next day, they had to ride in the same carriage. They rode in silence, and MC was very uncomfortable with this situation. Finally, Claudia asked him a question. Why is he on this carriage? He answered that the passengers who go to Kansas are either affiliated persons or those who have business with the Dragon King. The protagonist added that it is indeed unusual, but he intends to defeat Boros. The girl grabbed his clothes on his chest and objected that this is her mission. If she does not win, it is meaningless. At that moment, the driver interrupted them, saying that he didn't want to interrupt them, but he didn't think they were going any further. There was a huge stone boulder on their only path, blocking the entire road. The protagonist got out of the carriage, thanked the driver, and said that he would go on foot from here. Of course, the stones could be destroyed with magic, but the Dragon King's lair was already close, and if he used a lot of magic, his location would be discovered, which was not in the protagonist's plans. He jumped over the boulders, and Claudia did the same after him. MC muttered that it would be better if she came back. The girl replied that this was her hometown, and she didn't need his criticism. She assumed that he was lying about defeating the Dragon King, but in fact he was thinking of defeating her and taking his side, right? The protagonist looked at her, sighed, and replied that he was leaving. She called out to him, and at that moment she stepped on a rock, causing her foot to slip and threatening to fall into the abyss. He called her stupid, and at the last moment grabbed her hand. When he saved her, she apologized to him and looked somewhat depressed. He chuckled and told her to be more careful next time. The protagonist turned to go on. Claudia apologized to him again and gasped. He saw that she could not get up from the ground and thought that she probably sprained her ankle. For this, an ointment was needed. The protagonist thought that if they mixed his herbs, they would make an excellent potion. It was already getting dark, and it was time to get ready for the night. He took out the herbs, ground them, and made a healing ointment. Then he approached the girl, carefully rubbed her leg with the potion, and said that her leg would be healed by morning. The protagonist suggested that she rest, and he himself would be on the alert. Claudia said that all this was strange. She knew him as a person without a drop of humanity or sympathy. He muttered that he was like that now, to which the girl objected that if that were so, he would leave her. After a short silence, she asked him what he would do after defeating the Dragon King. The protagonist replied that it was all just to evaluate his strength, and that he had nothing to do with her house. She suggested that it was to surpass Reynard. The protagonist said that she could think whatever she wanted. He thought, if you think about it, in the original story, she worked with a dragon knight named Zek to defeat the king. Claudia was supposed to appear as a secondary character, and the game's plot had changed. He asked the girl why she came here by herself. What was she planning to do? The girl's face reflected sadness, and she replied that it was to settle the score with her life. She could not involve the Night Order in her personal affairs, and she should not explain it to him. The protagonist thought, so Claudia has a story that was not mentioned in the story? However, she could not win alone, since the decisive blow was dealt by the Dragon Knight Zek. He came to the conclusion that, as he thought, he shouldn't have left her alone. Out loud, he told her that if she wanted to free her land, she should do it herself, but she shouldn't get in the way either. The girl noticed how dirty his mouth was. The protagonist muttered, well, I already told her to go to bed. After a while, he was watching the fire in fascination, and suddenly heard the girl say thank you. He turned around to see what was going on, and was surprised to notice that she had said it in her sleep. He was very pleased. He was truly thanked. The next morning, they set out on their way. After a while, the protagonist said that they were almost there. Here it was, the Kansas territory. He noticed the ruined fortress that they encountered on their way, and thought that even such a structure of the former night could become so lifeless under the control of the Dragon King Boros. The thought occurred to him that with Lobelia, it would be easy as pie to win him. He would get rid of the villain as soon as possible. Claudia looked at him intently and informed him that the local village of Glinta was obliged to sacrifice to the king once a year, and today was that very day. The king's thugs were probably upgrading their security right now, so she advised the protagonist not to act recklessly. He rudely told her that he did not need her orders. They approached the Dragon King's domain and began to observe what was happening there. Increased security was walking around the entire territory, examining every corner. The protagonist thought that when the sun went down, there would be even more of them, so it would be better to wait for the morning and a convenient opportunity. He also noticed that there were too many people around one house. What could this mean? At that moment, the king's subordinates took the resisting girl out of the house, and at that time, one of them launched an exploding ball into the house, and the dwelling immediately burst into flames. The captive turned around and screamed in horror because her father and mother remained in the house. The protagonist and the girl watched this scene in horror. Claudia said the girl's name, calling her Toto. The protagonist was puzzled. Did they know each other? The fire flared up even more. The king's subordinates pulled the sobbing girl, forcing her to go further. One of them said that her father was an idiot. He should not have tried to free the victim. The second agreed with him that he could have given his daughter away quietly. Toto was heartbroken and could not stop her tears. Claudia frowned, clenched her fists, and quickly ran. The protagonist did not have time to stop her. He only thought, aren't the words about recklessness hers? The girl jumped up to subordinates and drew her sword. While she was fighting with the others, the two who were holding their victim were puzzled. Who was this woman, and where did she come from? Claudia swung her sword in a rage, striking one blow after another, and in a relatively short time, she dealt with her opponents. The captive recognized her savior and called out her name. Claudia ran up to Toto, hugged her shoulders and apologized for coming to help so late. She added that they had a lot to talk about, but first, they needed to find a safe place. Suddenly, a male voice was heard. The girls turned around, and Claudia covered Toto with her body. Another of the king's henchmen turned to the knight and said, "Wow, who came?" And it seems she killed his invaluable subordinates. He then noted that the victim's escape would cause problems, and Claudia would be responsible for everything. He took out his sword. The girl also took a fighting stance and noted that she would cancel all the rotten systems with sacrifices. The henchman grinned, saying that she was full of strength, and attacked her. The girl dodged his blow and struck back. He deftly dodged her blow and struck back. She thought that she had no weak points, and she had no right to lose. The enemy laughed. Standing in his way with such a limited skill as hers was very exciting and invigorating. He knocked the sword out of her hand in one fell swoop, which confused her. She thought that this could not be, certainly not in such a place. Suddenly, at that moment, the protagonist appeared and dealt a crushing blow to the enemy. His fist was still vibrating from the force applied. The girl turned to him in surprise that this was her fight. He answered her that if her goal was to die senselessly, then he did not mind, but then he would defeat the king himself, and she could sit here doing nothing. The protagonist also added that he had helped the parents of the captive girl earlier, and now they needed to go faster. Claudia couldn't believe her ears. What did he just say? He noted that they had killed the subordinates. There was no need to wait for a more serious attack. They would invade the Dragon King's castle. At this time, in the castle, the king was about to listen to his assistant's report on what was happening outside the castle, and he noted that it seemed that one of his important subordinates had died. The speaker assumed that, as expected, the Lord Dragon King already knew everything? The king replied that one could say that the subordinates were his eyes. He continued that Kansas was convenient, the nature was rich, and there were no girls dressed up unnecessarily, and the castle was good. Boros then ordered the speaker to make sure that he would eliminate the threat at any cost. The assistant bowed his head low to his ruler and said that he understood everything. Returning from the king, he thought about the fact that he had sent some servants to the village. The one who killed the subordinate would not be able to defeat so many people. He went out to the balcony and was confused by what he saw. All those he sent were destroyed, and in the center stood two. He cursed, "What is this?" The protagonist and the girl were examining the battlefield, and the protagonist expressed regret that he wasted time on such a trifle. The king's assistant could not believe his eyes. These two defeated everyone. This was ridiculous beyond belief. How could this happen? He turned to leave the balcony. MC noticed the movement and looked at the place where the assistant had just stood. The girl noted his gaze and asked, "Is something wrong?" The protagonist told her that everything was fine. There was nothing. At this time, the assistant ran to the king and, out of breath, addressed him. Boros asked him, what was wrong? Why did he look so worried? He answered his lord that their enemies turned out to be problematic. If he could explain the situation, then he could start doing so immediately. The king cut him off mid-sentence, saying, "Enough words, he should have dealt with this situation already." He continued that he was the one who had guided him, the only survivor, after his clan had been purged. He trusted him more than anyone. But to betray such trust was a crime. The pale assistant began to ask his master for forgiveness, but the king indifferently said that he was extremely disappointed. At that moment, the protection of his door fell apart with a crash, and the protagonist and Claudia entered the hall. The king said in surprise, "So here are his guests. Their manners are certainly not the best, but they are welcome to his castle." He extended his hands in greeting, and the allies saw the torn body of his assistant in front of them. He introduced himself to them as Boros, and invited them to address him as the Dragon King Boros. The villain continued that unfortunately, he had just lost a great subordinate, and looking at the protagonist, he remarked that such a good opportunity to become his servant, don't you think? Besides, he had always wanted a strong mage. The protagonist refused, and the king said in a feigned sad voice, "What a heartless, quick answer." He then asked his visitor why he was challenging him. Was he planning to control Kansas instead of him? The protagonist looked at the king with a heavy gaze and replied that he was here to free Kansas from someone like him. Claudia looked at MC with interest, and the king replied that it would be problematic. He continued that they had better stop this futile fight, and even a fool like the protagonist should understand that. The opponent stood up from the throne and said that he was a dragon, which meant that an equal fair fight was impossible, right? With these words, he grabbed his sword and attacked his opponents. The protagonist put his hand forward to weaken the shockwave and covered the girl with his body. He admired the strength of his opponent to create such a blow with one swing. However, the king also appreciated him and said that he seemed to be stronger than other people. The protagonist answered him that the weak bark the loudest. The king asked him in confusion, "What did he say?" MC touched his sword, and Boros was very surprised by what happened. He began to say that this is the strongest sword in the world, and there are only a few who can master it. He did not get to finish, because at that moment Claudia pierced his head with her weapon. He, as if nothing had happened, said that it was not good. He planned to wait and caress her later. The girl was surprised. Wasn't he supposed to die? She pulled the sword out of his head and dealt a powerful blow to him. But it was in vain. He continued to stand and said that it seemed to him that she wanted to die right now. The protagonist, watching what was happening, thought that things were bad and used wind magic shock. The king remained standing, but the girl was thrown to the side by a wave. She hit a column and went limp. The protagonist cursed that it was too much. He forgot that she was lighter than him. Boros was impressed. His opponent used wind magic to avoid his attack. He noted out loud that he was impressed and suggested, maybe he was a famous magician? The protagonist stretched out his hand in front of him, and his magic book appeared above it. The king was surprised. A rare spell book. Not all high-ranking magicians have such a thing. Its cover looks a little ominous. He supposed, "Is it really dark magic?" The protagonist grinned and replied that he could not believe that the king noticed this. Soon he will show him what it is, and activated Jet Black Spear and August Hell. Boros raised his sword and easily parried this magical attack. Then he was going to attack the enemy, but the protagonist used shock magic. And again, the king successfully deactivated his attack and struck back, which MC dodged with some difficulty. Then he used Sinister Chain, which entangled Boros and shackled his hands. The enemy noticed this tricky move and broke this chain. The protagonist noted with annoyance the strength of the enemy and thought that if this continues, he will have a hard time. He used one of his strongest skills, Death Thunder, and was pleased to see that his opponent fell, and the floor beneath him cracked. The protagonist noted that it seemed that the king finally broke. He approached the girl and was surprised. Has she not woken up yet? Crouching in front of her, MC told her to pull herself together. Claudia was still unconscious, but the king began to come to his senses. He looked at his hands, which were covered in blood, and said in surprise that no one had ever crushed him so hard. The protagonist called out to him and asked if he was still alive. And then he remembered that the Dragon King had a second form. There was an explosion. Boros said that he needed to become more serious, and he transformed into a dragon. Appearing before the protagonist in this form, he said that he recognized his strength. No warrior had ever brought him to this form in the last 500 years. But even a mage with Grumudra cannot compare with the true strength of the dragon race. The protagonist replied that, unfortunately, he had no intention of losing to someone like him. He asked the dragon if he knew what they call someone who is great in body but weak in spirit. They are called small fry. The enemy grinned and spoke. It seems he still allows himself such luxury to talk nonsense. I wonder how much longer this will last. He instantly raised his powerful paw to crush the protagonist, but he dodged and activated Catastrophe. The enemy was whirled in a whirlwind of shockwave, but he was able to resist and became even more angry. MC noted that he was not the same as before, and is it worth sorting things out further? Meanwhile, Claudia in her state seemed to see a dream about her life. Here she is still sitting at the table at home, reading a book, and her mother told her to put the book away when she sits down at the table. Dad asked her, "Is it still the same book?" Claudia told them that it was her inspiration. After eating, she asked her mother if she could go for a walk. She allowed it and warned her daughter to be careful. When she was little, she loved the story of one female knight. As the wielder of the holy sword Raishalam, she always wanted to save innocent people like the heroine of the story. In the village, she honed her skills in her own way, but her parents fully supported her dream. One day, her friends, Monica and Toto, were waiting for her. When they saw her, they called out and waved to her. When they gathered, Monica exclaimed that the Minika research team was heading to the forest. Toto sobbed and said that she had just been scolded by her parents. Claudia asked, "Monica never studies, does she?" Toto replied that it was okay. Claudia would defeat all the monsters that appeared. Monica remarked that they were like real sisters. Claudia replied that in that case, she was the eldest. Monica was indignant. How did that work? Toto reasonably assumed that it was because she was acting like a child. Monica hugged her friend and said that in order to become a knight, she would have to leave the village, but she would return. Claudia looked at the girls and thought that she would not want to be left without them, without her dear friends. Then the real nightmare began. The Demon King took control of their village. All their property was taken, and those who resisted were killed. The castle of the night heroes in the forest became the fortress of the Dragon King, but it did not end there. The invaders demanded the sacrifice of young girls, and the first of them was Monica. Claudia remembered how her friend struggled and screamed that she was in pain and asked to let her go. Then, realizing the futility of her attempts to save herself, she pointed at Claudius and shouted to her tormentors that this girl would quickly get rid of them. Let them remember this, because Claudia is strong. The opponents took their friend away, and only Monica's broken sword was left lying on the ground. The following year, she was chosen as a sacrifice. In preparation for their arrival, she and her parents dug a hole under the floor. They told her that from here she could escape without being caught by the king's subordinates. Claudia protested. She did not want to escape alone. She wanted to escape with her parents. Her father told her that only a child would fit through the hole, and her mother added that the most important thing for them was her life. For as long as she could remember, she admired the girl knight and her holy sword. She often played the role of her favorite heroine, and her father happily played along. But she left everyone behind, her family, her friends, the entire village. She was just a coward. Taking a deep breath, the girl opened her eyes. The protagonist noticed her movements and asked her if she was awake yet. Claudia called his name, wanted to get up and go to him, but something was stopping her from moving forward. She was surprised. Was it a magical barrier, and had it been working all this time? Claudia thought that even knowing that she would not win, she had to fight the dragon alone. Running away would not be true redemption. She was sure of it. True redemption was to defeat Boros and bring peace to the village. Meanwhile, the dragon told the protagonist that he praised him as a human for being able to endure so much. But wasn't it enough? It was time to put an end to this, and the dragon used the last ritual, Dragon Tear. A fireball burst out of his mouth, which he wanted to direct at the enemy, but at that moment, Claudia destroyed her protective barrier and broke free. Rising high in her jump, the girl raised her sword to strike. The protagonist said her name in surprise, and even the dragon could not believe that such a thing was possible. She raised her sword high above her head, screamed for Dad, Mom, Monica to give her strength, and landing on the dragon's face, she thrust her sword into him, saying that they would defeat him. The enemy shook his head from side to side. Giving up his last breath, the girl flew off him and the protagonist picked her up in his arms. The girl told him that there was still a little left to finish off the monster. MC replied that he knew it himself. Let her be quieter and just watch. At this time, the dragon rubbed his eyes and said that they should not be impudent. The protagonist understood, as expected. The opponent was getting a little tired. However, the reason why the dragon was feared the most was because of the unimaginable power of blood restoration. To defeat him, only an attack of destructive power and mana that exceeds his healing ability will work. He used his amazing book to finish off Boros with one blow and called for opening the gates of fear. He recited the spell, to the furious imaginary beasts, to them, thirsty for blood and flesh, he gives an offering, and told the enemy that his reign is over. The protagonist opened the illusory gates of hell, from which chains appeared. The dragon, not understanding anything, rolled his eyes and realized that he was tightly entangled in chains that began to pull him into the gates of hell. Emitting loud, menacing roars, he disappeared into the opening, and the doors behind him slammed shut forever. The girl asked the protagonist where this door led. He replied that who knows, he also has no idea. They returned to the village, where they were met by the villagers. One of the villagers said that he knew that the growling and the anomaly in the sky were black magic. It was terrible. The second noted that he was an arrogant magician, and their deaths were not far away. The protagonist thought bitterly that he was clearly not welcome here. He told the girl that it turned out that returning to the village was a waste of time. Claudia was deeply outraged by the ignorance of her fellow villagers. She shouted that they, idiots, should be ashamed of their behavior. Why were they being so rude to their benefactor? He had freed them from tyranny. She alone could not defeat the Dragon King, and they were still unhappy. After her words, a whisper went through the crowd. Everyone was discussing the girl's words. Toto came up to them, apologized to the magician, and explained that the villagers understood everything. They were just scared. He answered her that everything was fine. He had defeated the dragon, not for a reward or payment. Claudia's eyes filled with tears from the unfair treatment he received. The protagonist turned to leave, and the girl called out to him. She loudly shouted words of gratitude to him, and the villagers seemed to wake up. They began to express their gratitude one after the other. He looked at them, thought that this was their thank you for everything, and waving his hand, he left. A few days later, a girl came to the Knights Guild headquarters and gave a letter to Mr. Renard. He was surprised. A letter from Claudius? After reading the message, he was very surprised. The one who defeated the Dragon King? Was it Lobelia? The princess heard this name and thought with a smile that it seemed like he saved someone again. She remembered how cute he was during their conversation, and one of the night girls thought that this gentleman was amazing. Meanwhile, the protagonist continued on his way and thought that when he arrived at the next country, the first thing in his plans would be to help those in need to restore his reputation. But due to his character's notoriety and his sharp tongue, it was difficult to even start a conversation. In the process of moving, he asked many people if anyone needed help, but many refused him. Suddenly, he heard a meow behind him and saw a cat girl asking for help. She was very hungry. She leaned against him for support and help. He thought he had a great opportunity. The protagonist handed her dried meat and offered to eat it. The protagonist did not recognize this character, but it would not hurt to raise the favor of the beastman. Finally, the full girl sighed and said that it was very tasty. He asked who she was and what her name was. She replied that he would be surprised, but she was the daughter of the chieftain of the beastman tribe, Rydia Katsit, and meowed cutely. He was surprised and thought that he should leave. Rydia asked him where he was going. He realized that the chieftain of the beastman tribe, Razi Kitsit, and this was his daughter, Princess Rydia. She was selfish, ran away from the strict restrictions of her father and the rules of the tribe. The girl was truly cruel and selfish. He remembered how in the game someone called her useless. In response, she turned into a real demon, screaming, "How dare they call her useless? She will kill anyone and everyone who insults her." Besides, as soon as she became the leader of the tribe, she started a large-scale war against humans. If he goes any further, not only will he not be able to clear his name, but he will also be considered an ally of other villains. She asked him to stop, but the protagonist continued to walk. The game only revealed her name. There is no obligation or benefit to help her. He can just grab her and return her to the beastman. The girl meowed pitifully and said that she wanted to at least reward him for saving her. The protagonist was interested. Is she talking about a reward? She winked at him and blurted out that she will become his wife. He categorically refused her crazy offer. The girl replied that she fell in love with him. Is it not an honor for him? She began to brag to him about her figure, but he told that stupid cat to go home. She didn't want to lose him, so she offered herself to him as a pet. He thought with disgust at how persistent it all was, and indignantly exclaimed that she'd had enough of this behavior. He had no time for those who had brought trouble upon themselves. Suddenly, the girl meowed pitifully and fell to the ground. Cursing, the protagonist approached her and touched her forehead. She was shivering, and he thought of a fever. This was natural for a refugee without a plan. The protagonist sighed, saying that this creature was a problem, but he couldn't leave her helpless. The protagonist lit a fire and cooked food. Suddenly, the girl came to her senses, and the protagonist was amazed. Did the smell of food wake her up? He pushed the cup of food towards her and told her to eat before everything got cold. She thanked him warmly and pounced on the food. After trying it, she asked him what it was. She had never eaten anything more delicious. He told her it was just porridge with eggs. Rydia laughed and said that he would be hers after all. Just the thought of eating something like that every day made her happy. The protagonist rudely replied that he didn't care about the little rat. If her fever had gone down, she should hurry home. She objected to him. She didn't want to go back. She had to meet someone. MC asked again, meet someone? He couldn't understand. Didn't she just run away because she hated her tribe? He defeated dragons instead of knights. It wasn't strange that the plot could change. If a goal that didn't exist for Rydia appeared, it could be a chance to get something by helping her. The girl told him that she had to meet Rachel, who was learning magic in a place called Noah. According to the rule, once someone becomes a chief, they cannot leave the forest. So she must meet her one last time. The protagonist offered to take her where she needed to go, and in return, when she became the chief, she would do something for him. If she did everything, then she could consider the contract between them concluded. She threw herself on his chest in a burst of gratitude. He suddenly thought that it was so nice, but out loud he rudely pushed her away and said that she should stop pestering him. It was annoying. The protagonist asked her if someone was hunting her. She admitted that 2 night heroes were hunting her. They were being watched as darkness fell. They were 2 knights, Jake and Zordy. The girls said that if they ambushed them here, they would definitely kill them. Jake objected to her. That would not work. Their mission was to return the princess of the beastmen. If they kill them, wars will be inevitable then. Doesn't she understand that? Zordy understood and drawled. Is that all? They prepared to attack, but they couldn't know that the protagonist noticed them. He took the princess in his arms and used the movement skill. The knights did not expect such a turn of events. The protagonist called them idiots. He told Rydia that they would land on an open surface. The girl warned him about the danger behind. Jake fired arrows after them. MC activated the spirit of fire breath. Fireballs captured the arrows, and an explosion was heard in the air. Zordy indignantly asked her partner, was that fair? After all, he himself said that they should not kill them. To which Jake replied that he did not expect to hit them, so it was not his fault. He added that they should check how things were. If the princess was alive, then their mission would be considered completed. They went to check, when suddenly the protagonist stood in their way. Jake said ironically, he didn't expect the arrogant magician to be the prince's bodyguard. Zordi called out to her comrade and asked him if she could kill their rival. He answered that he would be watching from behind, she could rely on him. The girl laughed and jumped up to strike. The protagonist used a magic trick, and her spear whistled through the air and bounced off him. The protagonist sent a shock wave at her, while Jake fired his arrow at him. MC deftly repelled all their attacks, and in the end, the girl said that she was bored. She asked the opponent why he did not attack in response. He replied that he would like to talk first. Zordi asked what they should discuss, the criminal who helped the princess escape, or should I say, the kidnapper. Jake cooled her ardor and suggested that they take their time. Why don't they listen to the enemy? It was strange that he hadn't done anything yet. The protagonist sighed and said that he was not going to be at odds with them. The knight asked him what the essence of his words was. The protagonist said that he would simply kill them when he wanted. Jake covered his partner with his hand and replied that he could do it. Of course, but helping the princess escape required a legitimate reason. What was his, an arrogant mage's, goal? MC replied that his goal was for her to be able to meet her friend. He thought that these knights were not as bad as they wanted to seem. If he told them honestly, maybe they would understand and let them go. Jake asked him if it was a lie. The protagonist realized that they did not believe him and thought that then things were bad. They were so stubborn. He decided to stall for time so that Rydia could escape into the forest. But instead, the stunned protagonist saw how the princess appeared near him and attacked Jake with a straight blow in a jump. The knight did not even have time to really understand what happened and fell backwards from her blow. She exclaimed like, "Is this all that they, underdeveloped, can do?" The protagonist shouted at her, "What is this stupid cat doing?" Zordi asked if the princess would fight too. She didn't quite understand why, but her subordinate was lying on the ground, so she had no choice but to attack. She raised her weapon to strike and shouted that she didn't care about the mission. The princess would just die now. Rydia began to run in circles from her, and then jumped up a tree. She laughed and shouted that the attack of the humans would not harm her. Zordi responded indignantly, "Stop running in circles." Just as she was about to deliver another blow, suddenly one of her fingers was cut off, and blood gushed out of the wound. Rydia was also shocked by what she saw. This girl used the berserk mode, which provided the removal of restrictions, was activated by the owner intentionally, allowing the scythe to absorb blood. Once this happened, the person could not distinguish friend from foe. And while Zordi was smiling sweetly under this influence, the protagonist grabbed the princess and began to move away from the battle. On the way, he indignantly scolded the girl, saying, "Stupid cat, he told her to run away." Rydia protested. She also has pride. How could she leave her husband in trouble? The protagonist got angry at her words and shouted, "Who would want to marry her anyway?" Hearing the stomping behind him, he turned around and saw Zordi running after them. He thought that in this form she could not be stopped. He did not want to confront the Order of Knights, but he had no other choice. MC activated the sinister chains and tried to entangle the knight with them. Seeing that the girl easily got rid of them, he thought, did she just go and break them? At this time, she rose to attack, wishing him dead, when suddenly an explosion was heard near her and she was carried far to the side. The protagonist wondered whose attack it was. Suddenly, Jake appeared in front of him and told them to leave quickly. They had sent reinforcements, and if they didn't hurry, they would be caught. The MC wondered, wasn't their goal to bring the princess home? Jake confirmed that it was, but the situation had changed and so he would buy them time. The protagonist thanked the guy from the bottom of his heart and thought that he had said it more directly than he thought. Jake winked at them goodbye and expressed his hope that they would meet their friend. On the way, the princess apologized to her savior. He morally reprimanded her that she was still ignorant and young, and would continue to make many mistakes. She was indignant. What was he saying? She would never make a mistake. He objected that as long as she was alive, she would inevitably make mistakes and would suffer in vain each time. The princess sighed dejectedly, and the protagonist thought that as long as a person is alive, everything can be fixed. Getting up after falling, that's what life is about. All the efforts made one day, what will they lead to? Rydia noticed his silence and asked him if something was wrong. He answered that everything was fine, nothing like that. Suddenly, it seemed to him that he heard a voice. And this voice was so familiar. Although it couldn't be, the personality of this body is now in him. It's probably his imagination, and there was no need to worry about it. He made the princess more comfortable on his back and continued on his way. MC was carrying Rydia. They approached the house. She said that here they were at the Hill of Flowers. There was a girl named Rachel. She was practicing her skills. Then she heard footsteps and turned around and asked who was there. Rydia happily ran to her. shouting her name. They hugged, and Rachel said that she missed her. Rydia replied that she missed her too, a lot. Then she approached the protagonist and said that she was Rachel. Then she asked who he was. Rydia said that if you think about it, then she herself does not know. Nobilio stood with his arms folded in front of his chest, answered that for her he has no name. He is only a partner. Rachel said that she understood everything, and added that it does not matter. She is grateful that he accompanied her friend. Then she asked that his clothes are for a mage. MC answered correctly. She said that to think that she had met not only a friend, but also a mage besides her teacher. Then she asked him if he could show one spell on the scarecrow. The protagonist thought that it seemed that she did not know who he was. Low-level magic does not harm anyone. He took out his book and suddenly a voice was heard behind him. A man came out and asked what happened to Rachel. He heard a crying voice. He adjusted his glasses and was shocked. The protagonist thought that this was bad. He knew who he was. The man ran up to him, clenched his fists, shouted "Wonderful," and asked what was that incredible spell book. MC was confused. The man bowed to him and said that he sincerely apologized, but did he mind if he took a look at it? It was his first time seeing a real copy. He really wanted to support it at least once. The protagonist handed him the book and said that he only did it out of pity for him. The man thanked him. Then he said that it was not good to stand there and talk and invited them to come inside. He made tea and cookies. They all sat at the table and the protagonist thought that this was a surprisingly warm welcome. The man then tried to open the book and said that it did not open. Lobilio replied that the book only showed the contents to the one it chose. The man said that he thought he would finally read one. Rachel walked up to him, putting her hand on his shoulder, said that he would definitely be chosen someday. He looked at her and asked, "Does she think so? Then he will give up this time." He then added that it was the first time he met her. Rydia is the princess of the Beastmen. Rydia sat with her arms folded in front of her chest and thanked her friend's teacher for taking care of her. The teacher scratched his neck and said that it was more than an honor for him. He then added that to be honest, it was he who was being taken care of. Rydia looked at the teacup and said that she heard that he was running out of magic power. She brought a secret medicine from the tribe. He was very surprised and said that it helped him a lot. Magic power exhaustion is a concept in which magic flows out of the body due to extreme use of magic. Beastmen have a way to suppress it. The protagonist thought that as a mage, he was also interested. Rachel sighed and said that Rydia could be good too. To come all this way just for this. Good for the master. With this, her work hours will also go away. Rydia said that he is a hopeless teacher. Rachel replied that he is what he is. MC approached Rydia and whispered to her, asking, "Are they done? They should go back." She asked him, "Are they going home already?" The teacher said that they must be tired from the journey. He suggested that they stay for a while. The protagonist said that they were being chased. If they stayed, they could be involved and could become suspects. If he cared about the well-being of the student, he should leave them. They went to the door, and the teacher asked them to wait. He had something for them. He walked up to them, opening a box where 2 rings were, and he asked them to accept them. The protagonist thought that they were wedding rings. Rydia happily asked him how he knew that they were getting married. Rachel, along with the teacher, said in one voice that it was a magic item. Then MC said that they did not understand how precious it was to give magic tools to someone else. The teacher said that his student was depressed because she could not see her friend. But he brought Rydia. He saw her smile again. And also, for the first time, he touched a real spellbook. It was the least he could do. Lobilio held the ring in his hand and said that in that case, it was accepted. Then they walked out of the house and the teacher shouted that he wished them the best during their journey. Rachel said that they were healthy and safe. Rydia thanked them by waving her hand. They walked and she asked the protagonist, "Is this really a magic ring and not an engagement ring?" MC said that she was a stupid cat. Of course it was a magic ring. He could feel the energy coming from it. Then he thought that unfortunately, he didn't know what it could do, but he would find out after he took her to the great forest. It was strange, but maybe he was having so much fun because he had been traveling all alone for a month. Then he turned to her. She asked him, "What is it?" He told her that he had something he hadn't had time to tell her. She happily asked him, "Is he in love with her?" He told her, "No." To be honest, he had actually grown quite attached to her, so he had prepared for this conversation in advance. Then he added that he wanted to tell her his real name. His name is Lobilio Crowley. She was very surprised. She walked up to him and asked, "The famous wizard?" She always wanted to know how terrible a person he was. However, she didn't think that he was actually that kind. The protagonist thought, "Is he really kind?" Then he put his hand to his cheek and she asked him, "Is something wrong?" But suddenly, someone said his name behind them. Then, they were completely surrounded. Lobelia thought that they were surrounded by humans and demi-humans. One of them called Rydia to him. She wanted to say something to the protagonist, but he interrupted her and said that everything was fine. It was normal that her tribesmen came to them to take her personally. He told her to go. She ran to her tribesmen. If Jake was able to escape safely and deliver the message, then everything should go smoothly. It was time for him to leave. Then someone took a gun and said that stealing the princess of the demi-humans was much more serious than everything that had happened before. Then he shouted that they were on the verge of life and death. Because of him, they could die. MC was confused and asked what he was talking about. Then he felt the presence of dark magic from Zordia and Jake. He is the only one who uses dark magic. The protagonist shouted that it was not him. In response, he was told to shut up and shot. Rydia was shocked by this and tried to break free to save him. Sometime later, the headquarters of the Order of Heroic Knights is an underground prison. Lobelia was sitting behind bars and thought that the cage with shackles that limit magical powers and a barrier because of which he cannot escape from there. Jake is in such bad shape that he could not wake up. Naturally, the hero Reinhardt would not listen to his side of the story since he was his enemy. If he broke loose and started fighting, his reputation would only get worse. That was too bad. After all, it could all be over for him now. Then he looked to the side and saw Leon. She said his name and started walking towards him, but then she tripped and fell. When she stood up, she said that it had been so long. He said her name. She said that he remembered her name, and that made her very happy. Then she added that she had heard what had happened to the members of the Order. The protagonist replied that he had not done it. She happily replied that she knew it. She believed in him. She knew that the Lobelia who had saved her could never commit such a brutal act. Then she asked him to wait, since she needed to convince them otherwise. He replied that it was not necessary. She asked in surprise, "What?" He replied that it was his problem alone. She replied that she still owed him a favor. Besides that, she just wanted to be useful to him. He replied that he refused. She furiously replied that she was a princess and she promised that she would help him. Meanwhile, Yugal came and asked what she was doing there. She tried to drive him away and added that she had such deep feelings for Lobelia. The protagonist thought that he had just been told some kind of joke. Elsha sat and watched as Zordia and Jake lay unconscious. Then Reinhardt came. She wished him a good morning. He responded in kind. She said that she hoped that everything would be fine. He put the vase on the table and she added that it was not that she denied the version, but doubting this person without any solid evidence was somehow strange. He sat down next to her and stroked her head and said that she was too kind. The only mage who uses dark magic is Lobelia. That's definitely him. He hates it when his friends get hurt. He has to make sure that doesn't happen again. Then he came to the exit and waved his hand and added that he had to go, so he leaves everything to her. She sat watching Jake and suddenly he moved his fingers. She was very surprised. Meanwhile, MC was walking up the stairs under the supervision of the guards. When they entered the room, Team Reinhardt looked at him, and one of them said that he had arrived. The protagonist was confused. Then Reinhardt showed up. He said that he had not heard from the protagonist for the past couple of months, so he had no idea where he was, but he did not expect him to do something like that to his friends, and he challenged him to a duel. Lobelia asked, "Why?" He replied that he wanted to deal with him personally. The protagonist closed his eyes and called him an idiot. Then he asked, "Why don't they talk first?" Reinhardt shouted, "What is there to talk about with someone like him?" The protagonist replied that he did not do it. Reinhardt said that they had proof, so he shouldn't try to deceive them. He reached for his sword and said that he would never forgive him, and the guards started to uncuff the protagonist. MC thought that it seemed like he really wanted to fight him. He would like to fight him before speaking out, but if he doesn't hold out, it will only anger the others. In that case, come what may. The protagonist took out his book and began to cast a spell. Reinhardt ran to attack. The hero was able to dodge. Then he advised him to lower his sword. Its strength is much weaker than his. Reinhardt shouted that he refuses. Lobelia said that it was pity. Then he used magic, sinister chains. Reinhardt was chained and couldn't move. The protagonist began to tell that he did not hurt his friends. It was Zordi who did it when she turned into a berserker. Jake tried to stop her, and this is what happened. Reinhardt asked him what he wanted him to believe in such nonsense. MC replied that he should then ask the one who was there. He did not want to fight him. Reinhardt said that they were in such a state that they might never wake up again. He then broke free from the chains and asked what he was trying to run away from his sins, and called him a fool. The protagonist thought that the power of the Holy Sword. Reinhardt went on the attack and injured his shoulder. He then advised MC not to underestimate him. He then went on the attack again, but he did not succeed. The protagonist asked him why he did not hear. He is a hero who wants to achieve justice, so why should he not try to understand him? Why does he not believe? He stood in front of him and was at a loss. The protagonist continued that, or is it because he is Lobelia? Is it because he is a villain? He then opened his spellbook and said, "Enough, this is very stupid. Now he will get it in full." He used the black circle. Reinhard stood in the circle and was confused. He thought that it was weakening power. Then the protagonist used a dark spear. Reinhard was able to fight back. At that moment, the protagonist hit him in the stomach with all his might, and he flew away, breaking through the wall. He thought that if he really was a hero, he would not be knocked down now. Then, all the people who were watching this fight stood in front of him. One of them said that he was a fool, and how could he do such a thing? The girl asked, "Does he want to kill not only their comrades, but also their leader?" The protagonist was furious and thought that he himself challenged him to a duel. He cut his shoulder. Then he told them to move away. He did not want to deal with them. Reinhard went back into the room and told them not to quarrel. He held his hand and added that this was their duel. He was just counterattacked. Then he was told that it was useless to fight him alone because they had to defeat him together. He replied that if he couldn't defeat him, then everything was pointless. Then he added that he didn't want to see his loved ones hurt anymore. He held his sword forward and shouted, "Forward," and added that victory would be his. MC used his magic to shoot many spears at him, but he dodged it. Reinhard ran to attack and the protagonist decided to block it with his hand. The sword hurt his hand. Then he used the breath of the flame spirit and waved his hand. MC thought that this guy was getting stronger and stronger. The blessing of this sword and the support of his friends. Is this a plot armor phenomenon? Reinhard ran to attack him and shouted that he hurt his comrades and stole the princess. Then he asked that he was making excuses now. MC used magic and replied that he had already answered all of this. Rydia was leaving the forest to meet an old friend. He was just her guard when it happened. He successfully blocked the attack. Reinhard asked him if he was going to lie like that. The protagonist said that there was no use in explaining, and he remembered a fragment from his childhood, that it was impossible for someone like him to do good deeds. He was told that he was no longer a son, and he would not be able to defeat them. This was the true loneliness of Lobelia. The memories ended there. He shouted that this was how all people were rejected without even listening to them. Reinhard was confused and asked what. Then the protagonist hit him hard in the face. He flew to the side. Then the protagonist clenched his fist and said that he was great only because he was a hero of justice. He jumped on him and started hitting him in the face. Then he said that he should be hated only because he was Lobelia. He wants to live. He wants to live happily. He wants to be acknowledged. He also has the right to make someone happy. After all, he has a reason to protect others. Right? Reinhard was all beaten up and asked why he was crying. The protagonist sat on him and looked at him, shedding a tear. Then he clenched his fist and swung. He thought that he couldn't feel his body. Reinhard reached for the sword and took it in his hand. Then he stabbed it into the protagonist's stomach. Lobelia sat and spat blood. Reinhard stood up and looked at him, then he said, "Enough." At that moment, Elsha ran in and shouted, "Stop." Then Claudia and Yugel came. They stood up to protect the protagonist. Then one of them said that the battle was over. Reinhard replied that he almost got his revenge on him. He grabbed his head and said that this is not like him. He usually does not kill, being completely insecure. They screwed up. Reinhard was confused and asked, "What?" He was told that the protagonist did not steal the princess or beat Zordia and Jake. Everything he said was the truth. Reinhard replied that it couldn't be, he needed proof. He was asked, "Is he so sure about that?" Reinhard replied, pointing his finger at the protagonist, that he was a hypocrite. The protagonist thought that this was true. No matter how hard he tried, no one would believe it. If he, who had never been truly saved by anyone, chose evil, then why would he do this? Claudia said that he saved them. Without him, her homeland would still be under pressure. He was definitely her savior. Then the other man replied that at first he didn't believe that he had defeated the dragon faster than him, but the fact remained that the people were freed from the evil of the past. He trusted him. Yugel said that they were the royal knights. They had come on Leon's orders. Now it's their turn to protect the protagonist. He's the one who saved her. Elsha said that Jake woke up and told her everything. Lobelia helped the princess meet her friend, and then he protected her from Zordia, who was a berserker. Elsha shed a tear and said that waving a sword at an innocent person is wrong. This needs to stop. Reinhard replied that it was a lie. It was all Lobelia. A villain can never help anyone. Elsha said that he didn't listen to her and attacked without any evidence. She asked him to admit that he was wrong. She added that no one asked him to do this. Then Reinhard knelt down, and his entire team ran up to him. Elsha grabbed the protagonist's hand and asked him not to die. The protagonist replied that he didn't want to die. Anyway, he hated bad endings. At that moment, everyone stood and looked at him. She answered him that he had saved someone, and now there were people who finally understood him. She asked him once again not to die. She said that he should, because he should live. And at that moment, the ring was activated. They lit up. Everyone began to cover their faces with their hands from the bright light. They were perplexed. Then at that very moment, they disappeared. Elsha found herself in a cave and asked where she was. When she was next to the main character, they were suddenly thrown back by a bright light. She stood up and began to walk around the cave and thought that she heard a faint sound of wind from the other side. If she found a way out, then she would probably find out who the owner of this robe was. And at that very moment, the main character appeared in front of her and asked where she was going. She was very scared and screamed. Then they sat by the fire, and the protagonist said that he couldn't believe that she was so scared that she wet herself. She sat on the ground and asked him not to remind her of it. The protagonist thought that maybe he was very lucky, but he is not a gentleman, so it doesn't apply to him. Then she looked at him and asked that his wounds healed so quickly. What did he do? He replied that a wizard gave him this ring, and it seems that there are 2 spells in it that are activated when the owner of the ring is in danger. The first spell healed his wounds from the holy sword, and the second one teleports to a random place. When the ring transferred them to a cave, he went to drive out the goblins sitting in this cave. When he returned, she started yelling at him. She apologized to him. He puts on a t-shirt and said that everything is fine. She asked when they can go back. He replied that they will leave from there when the storm outside subsides. She asked in surprise, a storm? So that's why she heard and not the winds. He was standing at the exit of the cave and looking at the hurricane. This place is called the Devil Continent. He realized it when he saw the abnormal weather outside the cave. It is also known as a spiritual place. It was the site of the first conflict between humans and demons that lasted for more than 100 years. A place where living beings were exhausted and only the strongest races and monsters survived. Barren lands and abnormal weather are not uncommon here. He took out the compasses, looked at it, and thought that he was just guessing. But if his memory did not fail him, Spain in the south of the Devil Continent. Elsha sat there, saddened. MC thought that no one thought that he kidnapped her, right? Now he was thinking about what would happen after this teleportation. Reinhardt loved her so much that he would constantly search for her. There, in the harsh environment, probably no one would look for them. He folded his hands in front of his chest and thought that if they came back soon, he would definitely be killed. Then he thought that this was a new mission. No matter what happened, he had to bring her back safe and sound. They walked through the desert. The protagonist thought about how bad the weather was. It seemed like the storm last night had blown away all the clouds that had ever been. Elsha turned to the protagonist, but he interrupted her and said that if she wanted a temperature-resistant potion, they had already run out of it. She replied that she didn't. She wanted to ask why he still had disagreements with Reinhardt. Every time they crossed paths, he looked so angry. He asked what would change if he told her about it. In any case, he wasn't going to waste time explaining it to her. She replied that she understood everything. He was the type of person who wouldn't rest until he became the best in his field, which is why he was so dismissive of Reinhardt. Considering that he had been underfoot for a long time, it was natural that she would ask such questions. Meanwhile, scorpions appeared in front of them. Elsha was very scared and shouted that they were huge. The protagonist advised her not to make a fuss about ordinary bugs. Then he suggested that she just use fire magic. She was a sorceress too. They killed all the monsters with magic. Suddenly, another scorpion began to crawl out of the sand behind her. She was very scared, but the protagonist was able to defeat it. They went further through the desert. He asked if she got tired so quickly. She answered that she was not at all. It was not surprising, because this was an unusual battlefield. Then he said that she was useless. If they did, God knows what here, they could get into trouble. He picked her up and carried her away. She said that they had only recently met. She did not think that this was the right thing to do. He told her to shut up. He hates women who get in the way and make you feel like they're ready to die at any moment. She told him she wasn't that weak. Even Reinhardt could confirm that. The protagonist replied that it wasn't like her. Elsha was offended by him. MC thought that she was sometimes a bit like Reinhardt, that such a girl likes him. Meanwhile, it was night. She was sitting on the sand and said that she just couldn't understand that if she hadn't moved by his will, then why would he care about her? Then she asked him why he hadn't just left her in the cave. Was it because she had stood up for him back then? But she had done it for Reinhardt. She didn't want him to become a murderer. The protagonist replied that she had said she had done it for Reinhardt, but he was the one who had started this whole mess. Does she think he deserves forgiveness? She replied, of course, he's just too kind. He was surprised and replied that she was no better. She was a very sweet, honest heroine. She was very clumsy and kind, and she loved flowers, always wanted good with steel. The only problem was that she fell in love with Reinhardt after all. To be honest, it was hard for him to understand why he liked her so much. Then he said that he didn't care that she stood up for him. As long as she was with him, he would not let her die. She asked him why? He replied that it was not beneficial for him. If she died, it would put a big fat cross on his reputation, and besides, he just wanted her to live a happy life with him, so that she, as the main heroine of the game, could find her happiness. Reinhardt and Elsha met deep in the Forbidden Forest, where she had been sealed for over 1,000 years. But Reinhardt sympathized with her, thus breaking the seal and marking the beginning of the game's story. Deep inside her soul, there is a power that can turn the world upside down and at the same time keep the world in harmony. If she loses it, the world will simply collapse. The protagonist sat next to her and thought that there were so many people trying to take over her power, so she needed to protect it at all costs. She put her head on her knees. He thought that he was tired of helping everyone, and thought that he needed to take a nap. He put his hand to his chin, put his face on it, and fell asleep. Elsha saw that he was sleeping. She got up and ran. She thought that he couldn't have a reason to help her. Maybe he was just trying to take advantage of her. She stopped and looked at the sky and thought that she didn't see any monsters. She hoped that she was in a safe zone now. Suddenly, the ground began to disappear under her feet and she fell into a labyrinth. Then she stood up and with the help of her magic, she lit a fire. She started looking around and asked, "Is this a maze?" Then she thought that the exit from there is too high to reach. She needs to find an exit on the surface. She is having a hard time, even though she was able to escape from Lobilio, but she is just helpless. She sat down on the floor and was sad, saying that she missed everyone. Shedding a tear, she said that she regrets the nonsense she told him. She is very sorry. Suddenly, some strange things started happening to her. She was surprised and asked, "What just happened?" She stood and looked around and thought that maybe there is someone else besides her. Then she started running and thought that she needs to get out of there as soon as possible. She saw some doors and went through this one. A huge monster appeared in front of her. Meanwhile, MC woke up and thought, how could he not watch until the end? He can't believe that she ran away from him while he was sleeping. He glanced at the tracks, and yet they were fresh. He followed the tracks and came to a hole that led to the labyrinths. He thought that maybe this was not the same track. In the game, the labyrinth was somewhere nearby, and the probability of meeting monsters there is much higher than usual, and Elsha is not capable of fighting so that she could already be defeated. However, if she crossed paths with the master of the labyrinth, it is likely that he has already explained to her where to go to capture her. He stood and looked at this hole in the ground and thought that in this case, he should go to the room with the boss. In any case, it is not that difficult. He jumped into this hole, and because in the game he grinded there many times, he landed and monsters began to approach him. He looked at them and said, "These creatures." Then he thought that they are all A rank. It's perfect for stress relief. They ran to attack, but he was able to easily deal with them very quickly. Then he ran through the labyrinth to look for the boss. Then he turned his head to the side and thought that, "You can just turn at this corner." He turned and saw the doors. He kicked them open. Entering the room, he saw a huge monster holding Elsha in his hands. Most likely he wanted to eat her. She was hanging upside down and screaming for him to help her. The protagonist looked at this, took out his book. He said that she was causing so many problems. With his magic, he cut off all the hands of this monster, thereby freeing her. Then he began to attack this monster. He brought down a fire beam on it. Elsha was sitting on her knees and said that she was very sorry. The protagonist flicked her and said that they would have time to talk later. Then with the help of his magic, he created a spear and threw this monster and successfully defeated it. Then the protagonist grabbed his head. Elsha was perplexed and hugged him. They walked through the labyrinth, and he thought that S-rank monsters recover quickly, so it is difficult to fight them in a long battle. He tried to use dark magic, which can kill an enemy with one hit, but as he expected, it took too much of his strength. Elsha held his hand and said that she was very ashamed and asked him for forgiveness. She caused him too much trouble. The protagonist asked her to just forget about it. She must be scared and worried about him. Because of his tough nature, it is hard for him to show her that he is an ally. She told him that she did not want to cause him problems. She did not want to die and cause him problems with Reinhardt again. The protagonist replied that he just needed to keep a close eye on her. Besides, she really stands out among those fools, because she is completely desperate. Then he asked her, did she understand? She answered, yes. Then she said, what else? He interrupted her and asked if she wanted to say anything else. She thanked him for saving her. He forgave her and told her not to do it again. They walked through the desert, and he told her that he had to visit this city, even if they had to walk twice as far. She asked him, "The city?" He answered, "Arcadia." She heard something like that. It was a place led by Reinhard. Arcadia is located in the northwest, near the sea, where the hero fought the Demon King. Although it is known that he was entrusted with the management of the cities on this harsh continent, many things are in short supply, and it is very difficult to support this region. If you look at the scenario of the game, the villages are poor due to lack of food. At the end of the story, Reinhard learns about this and falls into despair, but since he is there, he wants to try to take on this responsibility. In the meantime, they approached the gate. Elsha looked at it in surprise and asked, "Is this really Arcadia?" An arrow was thrown at them. They were the inhabitants of this city. They were standing on the cover, holding a bow in their hands. They asked them who they were and where they came from. The protagonist answered that they lost their home during the war. They heard that they could help them. Elsha whispered, asking what he was talking about. He answered her that, if she wanted to make friends, she should do as he said. Then she called out that if they did not let them in, they would have nowhere to go, and they would die. She asked them to help. Then they were ordered to put away their weapons, and the gates were opened. One of the inhabitants came up to them and said that they must have come a long and hard way, and offered to show them everything. They walked around the city and looked at it. They saw people sitting on the street and looking sad. Then they went to the dining room. She said that she did not know that this city was in such a state. The protagonist replied that Reinhardt didn't know either. They usually embellish things when they say that everything is fine in Arcadia to deceive people, to get rid of unnecessary things. Society simply doesn't want to help the demons that live here, since they used to be enemies. Then he brought plates of food, put it on the table and told her to eat, and added that a pathetic person like her can't restore her strength even without eating. She looked at it and thanked him for the food. Then she took a spoon in her hand and tried it. Then she said that it was delicious, much tastier than the rat or monsters that they ate for so long. They will thank the residents for feeding them, right? Then she added that it was really delicious. She had never eaten anything like it. What did they put in it? Special spices? He told her to keep quiet while she ate. She glanced at the window and said, "Behind him." The protagonist turned around and saw the children looking at the food and drooling. She asked him what they were going to do. He invited the children to the table and put the food in front of them. They ate it very quickly and thanked them. Then they started introducing themselves. One of them said that he was Ars. He heard that there was a new kid here, so they came up to say hello. Another said that she was Jessica. She was so tired of home-cooked, bland food. The third said that he was Rui. He was sorry, but the ship stopped going there a few months ago, so it was hard for them to resist. The protagonist thought that it must be much worse than he thought, since there had been no help for 3 months. He asked them what they thought about the hero. They answered that he was a hypocrite, a liar, and a villain. He asked, but that was a bit harsh. They don't think so? Elsha felt sad after hearing that. First, he needs to teach these 3 how to survive in this harsh world. He would like to achieve a situation where the inhabitants of this place can live independently without the help of heroes. Then he asked them if they wanted to become stronger. They looked at him in surprise and asked, "What?" Then they answered in unison, "Yes." Elsha asked him, "He's not going to take half of their lives, is he?" The protagonist asked her, "What is she thinking?" Then he turned around and said that he needs to go to the patrol before it gets dark. Elsha answered that she understood and asked him to be careful. In the meantime, he took a walk outside the city. Then he stopped and thought that the townspeople shared their food with them, while they themselves do not have it. They need to be thanked. There should be easy prey somewhere around here. And suddenly a large boar appears in front of him. He took out his book and shouted, "Jackpot." With the help of magic, he created spears and attacked this boar and successfully knocked it down. He was very happy about this and thought that he was lucky to find the huge pig so quickly. He approached it, because it would not work. He should at least carry as much as he could. Suddenly, a man unexpectedly appeared from the book. He knelt down, put his hand on his heart, said that he was the Dragon King Boros. At his service. The protagonist created a spear with magic and wanted to kill him, but he shouted for him to wait. Then he said that he had no hostile intentions and asked him to put away the spear. The protagonist asked why he was still alive. He replied that, in short, his illusory Hellgate offered him a choice: become Lobilio's loyal servant for the rest of his days, or join the creatures that lived inside. He sincerely made the decision to serve under him. The protagonist replied that he was planning to stab him in the back as soon as the opportunity arose. He replied, no, even after he was released, he must sincerely swear loyalty. Besides, the dragon race always followed the strongest. He was shocked to the core. The protagonist thought that for some reason he didn't like hearing that from a villainous womanizer. He called his book to his face and told him to come back. Boros asked him to stop. He would prove himself useful. The protagonist said that then, here and now, he took the boar carcass. He wanted to leave the meat for the people of Arcadia, right? He added that he shouldn't worry. He could return to the spellbook at any time. The protagonist thought that he was indeed useful, but there was still a chance that he would betray him. He would use it until that moment. They came to the city, and Boros disappeared. The boar carcass lay on the ground. The protagonist replied that he didn't like just receiving. If there was anything left, they should dry it. The residents were very shocked by this. One said that to think that he could kill such a carcass on his own. Two replied that it was good that Mr. Tawari came to them. The protagonist thought that he would not mention that he was an arrogant mage, just in case. The man told him that they were hunting in the Valley of the Bone Eaters, and they would be glad if he joined them. The protagonist asked if he wanted to hunt. He was fine with it. The man thanked him for it. Elsha heard all this and asked if she could come along. She added that the protagonist taught her several attack spells on the way to them, and she wanted to help them as much as she could. In addition, he said that it was important to gain experience in real battles. The protagonist gave her permission and told her to do her best. Elsha was very happy about this. The man replied that the more people the better, and they would set out to hunt in 5 days, as planned. 5 days passed, and they set out to hunt. They brought down a lot of carcasses. One of the hunters said that Elsha used a good spell. She replied that Tori was a good teacher. They noticed that they had never killed so many before. There would probably be stronger monsters later, but as long as the mages were with them, everything would probably be fine. The protagonist thought that this was really strange. Low-level monsters should live in the bone-eating valley. Did killing Gorgros alarm the monsters in the area? But suddenly a monster appeared for them. They barely had time to turn around when they saw it. Elsha shouted for them to be careful, but it was too late. The monster attacked one of the hunters. They killed this monster, but the hunter was also dead? The hunters were too shocked by this and asked what happened. Did they miss a kill? Another hunter shouted that a group of monsters was approaching from the east. The protagonist thought that this was bad. Suddenly, chaos began. First, we need to lead everyone here. He shouted for them to retreat because he would take care of the rest. Elsha was sitting near the dead hunter. They came to her and said that nothing could be done. Then she took the sword in her hand and went on the attack. She easily killed all the monsters that wanted to attack them. Then she threw the sword on the ground and knelt down. She began to cry. The protagonist came to her and asked what happened. She hugged him. The protagonist thought that he no longer saw her as a defenseless heroine. She had changed so much because she was able to endure the hardships of these unknown lands with such a fragile body. She told him that she was one in the labyrinth and could not do anything. She thought she needed to try to become stronger. But in the end, others continued to protect her. She was unable to help at the right moment. If this continues, she will not be able to look the guys from the Knight's Order in the eye. Then she asked him what to do. He advised her to become a worthy person who can protect others. A month has passed since then. He taught the men how to hunt and the women how to cook. He also shared his knowledge with the children. Ars, Jessica, and Rui. In order to use the desire of orphaned children who wanted to gain strength to help others, he took them under his wing, taught them, shared food with them, and instructed them in the art of magic. Ars mined ore, and then he shouted that he succeeded. Jessica told him that he was amazing. Rui clenched his fist and said that he should try too. The protagonist thought that the people here grasped everything on the fly. Perhaps they always had talent, but there was no way to demonstrate it. The city became more lively, and it seems that he did not even notice how Elsha also made friends. She was sitting with a friend who asked, "Isn't it great?" Elsha asked her what she meant. She told her that even though she already had someone she liked, she was protected by another guy. And although her protector looked a little scary, he was also a handsome guy, just like in a fairy tale. She put her hand to her chin and answered that she didn't even know. Then she asked her if she thought Tori had feelings for her. Elsha asked, "Feelings? What kind?" She answered that she didn't think she was such a fool. Then she added that there was definitely a reason why that guy was so protective of her. For example, he liked her. She looked at him in surprise and answered that, of course, she thought he was cool, but she didn't have romantic feelings for him. Then she thought that there definitely was. Elsha added that she would always be suspicious of her. Her friend asked her, does that mean she was happy? She closed her fingers and answered that it wasn't that. Friend laughed and said, "See, that's what she was talking about." Night fell. The protagonist stood on the tower and observed the situation. Elsha came to him and asked why he wanted to help these people. The protagonist replied that he didn't need a reason. She said that given his past, the protagonist I interrupted and asked, "She thinks this is impossible?" She apologized to him. He said that it was okay, and there was no need to apologize for every little thing. Then he added that people can change if they choose the path of redemption. No matter how serious their sins were, they will definitely change. She asked him, will he be forgiven then? The protagonist replied that he didn't know, he had gone too far. But he was no longer going to hurt anyone or watch others suffer. If necessary, would he walk the path of correction his entire life? She asked him, what if she wanted to walk this path with him? She looked at him and pressed her hands to her chest. Then she added that, if she said that, would it be okay? He looked at her and replied that he could handle it himself. Besides, she had friends. She looked at him and replied that he was right and apologized for saying something stupid. Then she turned around and started to walk away, saying that she had things to do tomorrow, so she would go. She thanked him and wished him good night. The protagonist put his hand to his chin and began to think that she wanted to spend the rest of her life with him. This is some kind of nonsense, he misunderstood. After another month, they trained with swords. She was very good at it. Then she sat down on the ground and said that she had never hit him. The protagonist replied that she was not that bad. He thought that thanks to her small build, she moved dexterously and her sword strikes were faster. As he thought, she had more ability in fencing than in magic. In just a few months, she had already become the best in Arcadia. He then said that the morning training was over and suggested that they go eat, to which she agreed. Ars, Jessica, and Rui wished them a good morning. Rui told Ars and Jessica not to overdo it. They all sat at the table and the protagonist said that today he would teach them advanced magic. Rui, who was holding a fork with food in his hand, said. Finally, Ars slammed his hand on the table and asked, a powerful explosion spell? The protagonist replied, no. He then asked him, is he going to blow something up? He had been training students all morning. Then, one of the townspeople approached him and said that they were counting on him for the hunt today. He replied, okay. And during the day, he helped with various chores, an ordinary day. Perhaps this was the peace he dreamed of. The hunters then talked among themselves, and one said that they had caught another big guy. Another noticed that the number of victims had decreased and become calmer lately. The protagonist stood contentedly and thought that everything was going well, and at this rate, he could restore his reputation. Then a woman pointed her finger at him and asked, what's going on in the city? There was smoke coming from there. A few hours ago, a ship had arrived at the port of Arcadia. Elsha stood and watched as the ship of the Order of Hero Knights finally arrived with supplies. But it was somehow strange. Why was the spiritual church with them? The spiritual church is a discriminatory organization that hates and persecutes demons. According to the townspeople, they don't even acknowledge the existence of this place. Then someone turned to her. It was Elliot. He told her that they hadn't seen each other for a long time. Everyone had searched for her. It was bad luck that she was sent to the demon continent. She replied that someone had helped her, and she was grateful to him for that. She liked living in Arcadia. He replied that he understood everything and was glad to hear it. Then she asked, where is Reinhard? He told her that he didn't go. He asked him and his best friend to sort things out. On the contrary, his presence here was problematic. Elsha asked, problematic? The man behind her shouted that it was true. It would have been terrible if it weren't for Mr. Tori's help. Who knows what would have happened to them at all? Were they going to starve them to death? Elliot scratched his neck and said that it must have been very difficult for them. The man asked him, what kind of attitude is this? They were the ones who guaranteed their safety. He told him to shut up, took out his sword, it cut off his head and shouted at him to shut up, trash. Then a man approached him and Elliot told him that he had asked him to provide demons, but he didn't listen, which meant he was very stupid. Then he asked, right, priest? To which he replied that he was absolutely right. Elsha was shocked by what she saw and knelt down. He came up to her from behind, grabbed her by the shoulder and told her not to make such a scary face. She would finally get out of this dump. They came to cleanse this city of demons. If there were any idiots who would dispute the cleansing or those who would resist, they would all be destroyed. The protagonist arrived in the city, but it was too late. The entire city was destroyed. Then Ars turned to him. He was holding Rui's hand, who was dead. Jessica was kneeling and crying. The protagonist walked up to them and looked. Ars asked, what? He will be fine, right? Will he be able to save him? The protagonist looked at him and thought, potion. The children looked at him and said, a panacea. The protagonist replied that it cannot revive the dead. They also began to cry very hard. After everything that happened, he and the knights searched for survivors throughout the city. We only found 30 people. He thought that Elsha was missing too, but she couldn't have died with her sword skills, could she? Maybe she's looking for survivors too? It turns out that the spiritual church and the Order of the Heroic Knights are in cahoots. That's why so many demons were killed. In the original story, Elliot said that poverty came to Arcadia due to lack of supervision, and internal conflicts led to its destruction. That's what he said. Reinhard trusted his best friend, so he didn't even doubt it. The main character thought that if he could restore the city, then the peace would last forever. Everyone finally found the meaning of life and began to live happily. But everything was destroyed in a matter of hours. Then Elsha's friend came and shouted that they were here. A man ran up to her and said he was so glad she was alive. Out of breath, she leaned over and asked the protagonist what they should do. Elsa was taken by those men? The protagonist asked what that meant. She said she was protecting when they were almost killed. But then a blonde guy named Elliot showed up and told her to come with him and he wouldn't hurt them. He lied. Almost everyone was killed, but she managed to escape. And Elsa was just taken. Was he doomed to make bad decisions just because he was a villain? Did he have to become like Lobelio to survive? He had enough. He grabbed his head and laughed. He was ready to become anyone for the sake of those dear to him. If something was taken from him, he would take it back. Then he laughed even harder and said, why did he doubt all this? Everyone was puzzled, and one of them called out to him. He replied that he was not to worry. He was the arrogant mage Lobilio Crowley. Meanwhile, on the ship of the Knight's heroes, Elsa was kneeling. Elliot approached her, holding a mug in his hand. He said that it was enough to fool around and suggested that they have fun instead. He added that, after all, it was a wonderful day. She replied that he had killed innocents and was now drinking as if nothing had happened. He took a sip and asked what she was talking about. Then he added that the birth of a demon was sinful in itself, wasn't it? She hit him with her head. He grabbed her chin with his hand and hit her, causing a bruise on her face. Then he asked her when she had become so bold as to look at him like that. He grabbed her clothes and added that she had completely lost her mind after arriving on the demon continent. He came up close to her and said that the faces had always hidden behind Reinhardt's back, and now they were pretending to be important. He left her alive only to make her his woman. He started hitting on her. She told him to stop. He told her that she could say save her Reinhardt, no one would help her anyway. She closed her eyes and said, Lobelio, save her. He looked at her in surprise. He ran out of the room and asked what that sound was. He saw people in black cloaks standing on the ship. The protagonist replied that he was declaring that from now on, this was the beginning of hell. Elliot looked at him angrily and asked, arrogant magician, Lobilio? He then shouted to his comrades to quickly create a barrier, but it was too late. The protagonist's team attacked them. One of them said that all the monsters then turned to the priest and said that they were trapped. He told him that they must protect him and not let them break through. Elliot jumped and swung at the protagonist and shouted for him to die. The protagonist easily blocked his attack. He was very shocked and asked, magic barrier? Then the protagonist grabbed his face and threw him with all his strength to the floor. All his servants were very scared and started to run. The protagonist looked at them and shouted that they would not run away. With the help of magic, he released spears at them and killed them all at once. One of them was alive and knelt down and begged to save him, but a spear immediately stuck into his head. The protagonist thought that the god they worshipped was insignificant. He would make them experience the suffering they caused to Arcadia. Then the protagonist started walking around the ship and thought that Elsa was somewhere inside. Then he looked to the side and thought that this was the only room with an open door. He went there and saw her. He saw a bruise on her and was very angry. She was very scared. The protagonist looked at his hand and thought that it was no wonder that she was shaking with fear at the sight of blood on his hands. After all, he looked like a villain now. She wiped her tears with her hand and said that she believed, she was sure that he would come. The protagonist came up to her and stroked her head, saying that it was stupid to believe in someone like him. Then he added that before returning to the others, she should drink this restoration potion. He gave it to her hand. She looked at it and then said that she had never seen one like it, and the color was strange. He told her that she should just drink it. When he said to drink, she should do it. She replied that she understood everything and then drank the potion. Then she said that it was a little bitter and passed out. The protagonist took her in his arms and thought that actually it also acts as a sleeping pill. He can't let her see all the horror that is happening outside. The protagonist returned to everyone else and asked what they had. One of his squad replied that the enemies had been destroyed, but they could not find ours. The protagonist was very shocked and asked, what? Among his students, he had the most skill in advanced magic. He stubbornly insisted that he wanted to avenge Rui, so he agreed. But it seemed that he made a mistake by taking him along. He handed Elsh over to the girl's hands, and then an explosion was heard. He asked, are there any enemies left on the ship? He thought that he should get ready, since he had no more room for mistakes. Then he told everyone to leave and return to the boat. They asked him, what about him? He told them that he would deal with the remaining enemies and find ours. He turned his back on them and shouted for them to leave. That was an order. He ran through the ship, thinking that after such an explosion, the ship would not last long. If they all searched together, they would quickly sink. He would not let anyone else die. Elliot said it was risky, but it worked. He stood at the top and held the tied-up Ars, brought a sword to his throat. Elliot asked him, and how did those fools from Arcadia get such a protector like? The protagonist asked him to let Ars go. He answered him by asking, so, does he care about the lives of children? Recently Elsha called his name. Did something happen between them while she was with him? Then he added that he would let him go if he killed himself. Ars told him that if he was going to kill someone, he should kill him. He was not afraid of that. Even if he died, the teacher would avenge Rui and the others. Elliot furiously shouted at him to close his mouth. He began to draw his sword across his throat, but the protagonist managed to use the dark shackles with his magic. He released the chains and took the child. But he didn't have time to remove these chains. He thought, switched places. Is this the ability of his sacred weapon? The protagonist approached Ars and said that, thank God, he was alive. He took out a potion and poured it into his mouth. The protagonist thought that he managed to destroy the chains. This is the best medicine he has. It should stop the harmful effects of black magic. Elliot asked that this was his friend from the demonic clan Rui. He is a human, and he is talking such nonsense. The protagonist said that he was sick of people like him. Does he seem to be completely out of his mind? Does he even know what it's like to see these damn demons torment his family and friends in front of his eyes? To endure bitterness and pain, to be tortured and bullied. Elliot took the sword in his hands, put it in front of him and added, a naive brat like him. He made an attack, adding that he did not dare to speak arrogantly to him. The protagonist took the child in his arms, was able to dodge the attack. He thought that he needed to shield him from Elliot. He used magic to create a wall of fire. Then he hid Ars. Elliot walked through the fire and said that he did not understand at all. Why would someone like Lobilio, proud and arrogant, fight for others? The protagonist replied that he did not care what a scumbag like him thought. Elliot went on the attack and shouted that he was definitely not going to give in to such a fool. He made a sword strike, but the protagonist was able to successfully block the attack. Elliot was also betrayed by demons in the past, just like Lobilio, which means they were both villains, consumed by a thirst for revenge. But that bastard injured Rui and his friends. Now he cannot retreat. He thought that the sacred weapon, Grotti Switch, has an ability. It swaps the owner with the target. But the recharge time is long and the range is limited. The black magic that can destroy the remaining enemies inside the ship is illusory Hellgate. In order to create a portal that can swallow the entire ship, he needs to conserve magical energy until it is fully charged. So other powerful spells cannot be used now. His death will not be easy and painless. It made him feel the fear of death and pain. Meanwhile, his crew was sailing on a boat, and Elsha woke up there. Yuma told her that she was awake. She asked him where Lobilio was. He told her that he was still on the ship. She glanced at the ship and shouted that they had to go back. He told her, you can't, adding that they would like to too, but Mr. Lobilio wanted her to be safe. Even if she was, you probably just seemed to be trapped and died. She replied that it couldn't be. Meanwhile, Elliot and MC were fighting on the ship. The protagonist jumped to the side. Then he looked at him and thought, why is this bastard still so self-confident? Even if he wins, there is no way out, and the ship will still sink. Is he just arrogant, or is he really up to something? Elliot said that he will finish with one blow, and advised the protagonist to get ready. The protagonist replied that it means that this is why they say, the weaker the dog, the louder the bark. The outcome is obvious. They went on the attack. The protagonist used magic, and with the help of it cut off his legs. Elliot grabbed it and screamed in pain. The protagonist approached him. Elliot began to scream in fear that he understood everything, and asked to stop, and asked, will he torture him too? And at that moment, instead of Elliot, a priest appeared in front of him. The protagonist was very surprised, asked, how did he get here? Also very shocked and asked, arrogant magician? The protagonist thought that Elliot used his ability? It turns out that there was someone outside after all. He could switch places. He only doubted for a moment, and he took advantage of it. Was he unconsciously sympathizing with him? The priest replied that he was only on the boat. Damn him, Elliot. He began to ask the protagonist to save him. He added that if he saved him, he would make sure that the spiritual church fully supported Arcadia. In fact, Elliot made them do it. The protagonist replied that he understood everything. The priest added that he was magnanimous. He would never forget this debt as long as he lived. And then the protagonist cut off his head. He then started walking through the ship and thought that the legendary Hellgate would soon activate. He had already wasted too much time. Then he approached Ars and asked him for forgiveness for making him wait. He patted his head and added that they needed to get out. Meanwhile, Elliot was sailing on a boat and saying that he was an idiot. This is what happens when you don't finish him off with one hit. He would tell Reinhard this, and they would attack the entire Night Order. This time, he would destroy them all, the demons and those who indulged them. Suddenly, a voice came from behind him, saying that, no remorse. How did he see? He was very scared and shouted, who the hell is he? He replied that he was a direct subordinate of the arrogant magician, the Dragon King, Boros. Elliot was very shocked and asked, the Dragon King? The one that Lobilio supposedly defeated. Boros replied that his master had told him not to show himself in public, and he had to watch quietly. But he had behaved so disrespectfully towards his master that he wanted to finish him off all the time. Now he can do whatever he wants here. Elliot was very scared and started calling him names. Boros added that he would first remove his skin, piece by piece. He grabbed his cheek.